I'm Ethan Cole. I'm 29 years old. 12 years ago, my parents drove me to the airport on Christmas Eve with a single suitcase and told me I didn't belong in their home anymore. They said my real future was somewhere else, somewhere far away, and that I should be grateful they were giving me a chance. I was 17. I was wearing sweatpants and a hoodie. I thought we were going to visit relatives. We weren't. My mother didn't even get out of the car when we pulled up to the terminal at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. She just stared straight ahead, hands gripping the steering wheel like if she looked at me, she might change her mind. My father popped the trunk, dragged out my suitcase, and handed me an envelope. Inside was a one-way ticket to Seattle. "Your aunt will take you in," he said, like he was dropping me off at a summer camp instead of cutting me out of his life. I didn't have an aunt in Seattle. At least, not one I knew. "I don't understand," I said. My voice sounded smaller than I felt. "What did I do?" He didn't answer that question. He never did. "You've always been difficult, Ethan," he said instead. "This is what's best for everyone." Best for everyone. That phrase stayed with me for years. I stood there on the curb as cars pulled up and drove off, families hugging, kids laughing, Christmas music drifting faintly from somewhere behind the glass doors. And I realized, slowly and completely, that they weren't coming back. They got in the car. They drove away. And that was it. Before I go any further, if this story pulls you in even a little, take a second to like and subscribe to Women Reddit Stories. Only if you actually want to stay until the end. And wherever you're listening from, drop your city and time in the comments. I always read them, and it's wild seeing how far these stories travel. I didn't cry right away. That's the part people don't expect. I stood there for maybe 10 minutes, maybe 20, holding that envelope like it might explain something if I stared at it long enough. Then a security guard asked if I was okay, and I heard myself say, "Yeah, I'm just waiting on someone." I wasn't. The ticket was real. The flight was boarding in less than an hour. And there was a second sheet of paper folded inside the envelope, an address in Tacoma, Washington, and a name, Lena Brooks. No explanation. No note. Nothing that said why. Just a destination. So I got on the plane. Because what else was I supposed to do? Seattle in December feels like a different planet when you've spent your whole life in Texas. The cold hits first, sharp, wet, the kind that seeps into your bones. Then the gray sky, the constant drizzle, the way everything feels quieter. I landed just after midnight. I remember standing near baggage claim, watching people reunite with their families, couples hugging, parents lifting kids off the ground, laughter echoing off the tiled floors. Everyone had someone. Except me. I almost didn't call the number on the paper. I stood there with my phone in my hand for a long time, staring at it, thinking maybe this was all a mistake. Maybe my parents would call. Maybe they'd say they'd gone too far, that I should come home. They didn't. So I dialed. "Hello?" A woman's voice. Tired, cautious. "Hi, my name is Ethan Cole," I said. "I think I'm supposed to come stay with you?" There was a pause. Not a short one. The kind that stretches long enough to make your stomach drop. "Who?" she said finally. "Ethan Cole. My parents, they gave me your address. They said you were my aunt." Another pause. Longer this time. "I don't have any siblings," she said slowly. "And I don't know who you are." I felt the ground tilt under me. "They said," I stopped. Because suddenly it sounded ridiculous. "They said you were family." "I think you have the wrong number," she replied, her voice softening just a little. "I'm sorry." Then the line went dead. I didn't move for a while after that. People brushed past me, wheels of suitcases clicking against the floor, announcements echoing overhead. Somewhere, a kid started crying. Somewhere else, someone laughed. And I just stood there. 17 years old, in a city I'd never been to, with nowhere to go. That was the moment it hit me, not the drive, not the airport goodbye, not even the flight. This was when I understood. They hadn't sent me away. They'd gotten rid of me. I ended up sleeping in a chair near the terminal that night. Not really sleeping, more like drifting in and out, waking every few minutes, checking my phone like it might magically fix everything. It didn't. By morning, I had two options: panic or figure something out. So I chose the second one. I found a cheap motel not too far from the airport. The kind with flickering neon lights and a front desk clerk who barely looked up when I paid in cash. I told him I was in town visiting family. He didn't ask questions. For the next few days, I made calls. I checked directories. I tried to find a connection to the name Lena Brooks. Nothing. It was like my parents had pulled that name out of thin air. Eventually, the money I had ran low. I had a part-time job back home, some savings, but not enough to last long. So I did what I had to do. I found work. Dishwashing at a diner in Tacoma. Long hours, minimum wage, hands constantly raw from hot water and soap. I lied about my age. I lied about my situation. I said I'd just moved for family reasons. No one looked too closely. And little by little, I built something. A room in a shared apartment. Night classes to finish high school. Then community college. Then a transfer to a university in Washington. It wasn't easy. It wasn't fast. But it was mine. And over time, the anger faded. Not completely, not all at once, but enough that I could function without it swallowing me whole. I stopped wondering why they did it. I stopped waiting for an apology. I stopped expecting anything from them at all. By 29, I had a life I was proud of. I worked as a civil engineer in Seattle. I had friends, a routine, a future that felt stable in a way my past never had. If you asked me about my family, I kept it simple. They're not in the picture. Most people didn't push further than that. And I preferred it that way. Because the truth was complicated. And messy. And still, even after all those years, a little too sharp to hold comfortably. I thought that chapter of my life was closed. I was wrong. 3 weeks ago, I was at my desk reviewing site plans for a highway expansion project just outside Seattle when my phone rang. Unknown number. Texas area code. I almost didn't answer. Something about it made my chest tighten in a way I couldn't explain. But I picked it up anyway. Hello? Is this Ethan Cole? The voice was calm. Professional. Not familiar. Yes. My name is Daniel Whitaker. I'm an estate attorney based in Austin, Texas. Estate attorney. The words landed heavier than they should have. I'm calling regarding Margaret Holloway, he continued. Your biological grandmother. I sat up straighter in my chair. I'm sorry, I said. My what? There was a brief pause, like he was choosing his words carefully. Margaret Holloway passed away 2 weeks ago, he said. And according to her will, you are listed as her sole beneficiary. Everything in the room seemed to go quiet at once. I don't have a grandmother, I said automatically. My parents told me. That she was deceased, he finished gently. Yes. Another pause. I'm afraid that information was inaccurate, he said. I didn't know what to say. Didn't know what to think. For 12 years, I'd believed I had no one. No extended family. No roots. Nothing. And now. Mr. Cole, he continued, your grandmother left you her estate. Including property, investments, and liquid assets. The total value is approximately $18.7 million. The number didn't make sense. It didn't feel real. It felt like something meant for someone else. There's also something else, he added. Your grandmother had been aware of your situation for quite some time. My grip tightened on the phone. What does that mean? It means she knew where you were, he said. She knew what you were building. And she chose to remain at a distance, for reasons explained in a letter she left for you. A letter. My throat went dry. Why didn't she contact me? I asked. I believe she addresses that directly, he said. Then he paused. But before we proceed, there is a complication. The word landed like a warning. What kind of complication? A brief silence. Then. Your adoptive parents, Thomas and Rachel Cole, have filed a legal claim against the estate. I felt something cold settle in my chest. A claim? I repeated. Yes, he said. They are contesting the will and seeking a substantial portion of the inheritance. I stared out the window at the gray Seattle sky, my reflection faint in the glass. They haven't spoken to me in 12 years, I said slowly. I'm aware, he replied. Then why would they think they're entitled to anything? Another pause. Because, he said carefully, they're arguing that they raised you, supported you, and therefore have a financial interest in any inheritance you receive. I let out a short, disbelieving laugh. They drove me to an airport on Christmas Eve and left me there. And now? Now they wanted half of something they never even knew existed. Or maybe they did. Mr. Cole, the lawyer said, his voice steady, I think it's important we speak in person. There are details in your adoption records that you need to see. Adoption records. Details. My life, the part I'd buried and tried to move past, was opening back up again. And this time, it wasn't just about abandonment. It was about something else. Something bigger. Something they'd been planning all along. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of my couch in my apartment in Seattle, lights off, the glow from the city bleeding through the blinds in thin gray lines. My phone was still in my hand, the call with Daniel Whitaker long over, but everything he said kept replaying like it hadn't ended. $18.7 million. A grandmother I was told didn't exist. And Thomas and Rachel Cole, the people who left me at an airport like unwanted luggage, now trying to claim a piece of it. It didn't feel real. It felt like someone had taken my life, flipped it over, and shaken loose everything I thought I understood. I got up around 2 a.m., walked into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and didn't drink it. Just hold it. My hands weren't shaking, but something deeper was, something quiet and constant. For years, I'd trained myself not to think about them. Not to ask questions. Not to go digging for answers that would only make things worse. Now those answers were showing up anyway. And I wasn't ready for them. The next morning, I called in sick to work. That alone should tell you how serious it was. I didn't call in sick. Ever. But there was no way I was sitting in a meeting pretending to care about drainage plans while my entire past was unraveling in real time. At 9:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Texas area code again. I stared at it for a second before answering. Hello? Ethan, my mother's voice said, soft and familiar in a way that made my stomach twist instantly. Honey, it's Mom. I didn't respond right away. I hadn't heard her voice in 12 years. And somehow, it sounded exactly the same. Warm. Controlled. Like nothing had ever happened. How did you get this number? I asked finally. A small pause. We've always had it, she said. We just didn't want to intrude. Didn't want to intrude. I let out a quiet breath, something between a laugh and disbelief. You left me at the airport, I said. I don't think intruding was your main concern. Ethan, she said, her voice tightening slightly, we need to talk about what's happening. What's happening? Not what happened. That told me everything. I already spoke to the attorney, I said. So let's skip the part where you pretend you're calling to check on me. Another pause. Longer this time. Then, a shift in tone, subtle, but unmistakable. We were going to reach out, she said. We just found out about the estate a few days ago. I leaned back against the kitchen counter, crossing my arms. How? I asked. There was a slight rustling sound on her end, like she was adjusting the phone. It came up through some legal notifications, she said vaguely. Your father handled most of it. Of course he did. Put him on, I said. A moment later, his voice came through. Ethan. Just my name. No apology. No hesitation. Like we'd spoken last week instead of over a decade ago. Why are you contesting the will? I asked, getting straight to it. We're not contesting it, he said smoothly. We're just ensuring that what's fair is recognized. What's fair? I repeated. Yes, he said. We raised you for 17 years. We provided for you, supported you, gave you opportunities. You drove me to Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport and left me there, I cut in. Silence. Then. You're remembering it wrong, he said. The words landed like a slap. I'm remembering it exactly, I said, my voice steady now. I was in sweatpants. I thought we were visiting family. You handed me a one-way ticket and told me I didn't belong in your home anymore. We sent you somewhere with opportunity, he said. You've clearly done well for yourself. That proves we made the right decision. For a second, I didn't even know how to respond to that. The logic was so twisted it almost didn't make sense. You abandoned me, I said. We made a difficult choice, he corrected. I closed my eyes briefly. There it was. Not denial. Reframing. Always reframing. And now you want money, I said. It's not about money, my mother cut back in quickly. It's about family. I actually laughed this time. A real one. Family? I said. You told me I wasn't yours. You were upset, she said. You misunderstood what we meant. I misunderstood being left at an airport with nowhere to go. You had a ticket, my father said. You had an address. I thought about that piece of paper. The name. The number that led nowhere. You sent me to a stranger who didn't even know who I was, I said. That's not, he started. I called her, I cut in. She had no idea who I was. Silence. Not defensive this time. Just quiet. And that told me something. Something important. You didn't even check, did you? I said slowly. We had reason to believe, he began. You didn't check, I repeated. Another pause. Then my mother again, softer now. Ethan, sweetheart, what matters is that everything worked out. Everything worked out. The phrase sat between us, heavy and hollow. I slept in an airport, I said. I worked dishwashing jobs just to survive. I lied about my age to get hired. I put myself through school with zero help from you. And you succeeded, she said, almost gently. We always knew you would. That was the moment something shifted inside me. Not anger. Not a shock. Just clarity. You don't get to take credit for what I did after you left me, I said. We're not taking credit, my father said. We're asking for what's reasonable. Which is 50%, he said. The number hit harder than the inheritance itself had. Half. 9-point-something million dollars. For abandoning me. You're serious, I said quietly. Ethan, my mother said, her voice soft again, almost pleading now, we don't want this to get ugly. We can resolve this privately. Avoid lawyers, avoid court. No, I said immediately. A beat of silence. What do you mean no? My father asked. I mean no, I repeated. You don't get to decide how this goes. If you have something to say, you can say it through your lawyer. Ethan, don't be like this, my mother said. Like what? Cold, she said. Distant. This isn't who you are. I let out a slow breath. You don't know who I am, I said. And for the first time in the entire conversation, neither of them had a response. I'm done here, I added. Don't call me again. Then I hung up. My hands weren't shaking this time. If anything, they felt steadier than they had in years. Like something had finally settled into place. I stood there in my kitchen for a while after the call ended, staring at nothing in particular, letting the silence stretch. Then my phone buzzed again. A text. Unknown number. But I already knew who it was. Rachel, we're still your parents, whether you like it or not. I stared at the message for a few seconds. Then another one came in. Rachel, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. I exhaled slowly. There it was. No more pretending. No more soft voices or careful wording. Just pressure. Just control. The same pattern, just dressed differently. I didn't respond. Instead, I blocked the number. Then my father's. Then any unknown Texas number that tried to come through after that. A few hours later, I called Daniel Whitaker back. I want to meet, I said as soon as he answered. Of course, he replied. Are you able to come to Austin? I looked around my apartment, the space I'd built piece by piece, the life I'd fought for. Yeah, I said. I'll fly out tomorrow. Good, he said. There are things in your file that I'd prefer not to discuss over the phone. What kind of things? I asked. A brief pause. The kind that explains why your parents might feel entitled to this inheritance, he said carefully. My chest tightened. They knew about her, didn't they? I said. Another pause. Yes, he replied. The word settled heavy in my stomach. Not surprising. Confirmation. I'll see you tomorrow, I said, and ended the call. That night, I packed a small bag. Not a suitcase this time. Just enough for a few days. As I zipped it up, I caught my reflection in the mirror across the room. Older. Tired. But steady. 12 years ago, I stood in an airport with no idea what was coming next. This time, I did. And whatever was waiting for me in Texas, whatever truth had been buried all these years, I was finally going to face it. The next morning, I was on a flight headed back to Texas. Not Dallas. Austin. It felt strange even booking the ticket, like stepping into a version of my life I'd deliberately avoided for over a decade. I'd built everything I had in Washington for a reason. Distance wasn't just physical. It was protection. Now I was undoing that. Piece by piece. The plane landed just after noon at Austin Bergstrom International Airport. Warm air hit me the second I stepped outside, thick and familiar, carrying that dry Texas heat I hadn't felt in years. It smelled like memory. Like a life I didn't recognize anymore. I grabbed a rideshare and gave the driver the address Daniel Whitaker had sent me. His office was downtown, in one of those glass and steel buildings that looked clean, expensive, and completely impersonal. Which, somehow, felt appropriate. Daniel Whitaker met me in the lobby. Mid-50s, tailored suit, calm eyes, the kind of person who looked like he handled difficult conversations for a living. Ethan, he said, extending a hand. I shook it. Thanks for coming in on such short notice. I didn't think this was something to wait on, I replied. He gave a small nod, like he agreed. Let's go upstairs. His office was quiet. Not the sterile kind of quiet, but controlled. Intentional. He closed the door behind us and gestured for me to sit. Before we get into the documents, he said, taking his seat across from me, I want to make sure you're prepared for what you're about to see. That sentence alone told me this wasn't going to be simple. I've had a rough 24 hours, I said. I think I can handle it. A faint smile. Fair enough. He slid a folder across the desk. Thick. Worn at the edges. Not new. These are copies of your original adoption records, he said. Along with additional documents your grandmother obtained several years ago. My grandmother. The word still felt unfamiliar. I opened the folder. At first, it looked like exactly what you'd expect, standard paperwork. Forms. Signatures. Background checks. Home study reports. Normal. Until it wasn't. About halfway through, I noticed a section flagged with a yellow tab. I flipped to it. A typed report. Family background, child. I scanned the paragraph quickly. Then slowed down. Then stopped. Because there it was. One line. Highlighted. Maternal grandmother, Margaret Holloway, Austin, Texas. Reported ownership of multiple real estate holdings and investment portfolios of significant value. My stomach dropped. They knew, I said, not looking up. Yes, Daniel said quietly. I read the line again. Then again. They knew before they adopted me, I added. Yes. The word felt heavier this time. Like it had weight behind it. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling for a second, trying to process what I was looking at. 17 years. 17 years of birthdays, school events, family dinners, all built on something that started with that one line. Keep going, Daniel said. I looked back down at the file. The next document was a handwritten note, scanned, slightly faded. From a caseworker. Applicant, Thomas Cole, asked repeated questions regarding biological family's financial status. Appears unusually focused on long-term inheritance potential. Flagged for review. I let out a slow breath. Flagged, I repeated. It was noted, Daniel said. But not acted on. Why not? He gave a small shrug. Overworked system. Understaffed departments. It happens more than it should. I nodded, though the explanation didn't make it sit any better. I turned the page. More forms. More signatures. Then another tab. This one marked in red. I hesitated for a second before flipping to it. An email. Printed. Date, March 3, 2007. From Thomas Cole. To private attorney. Subject line, long-term considerations. My chest tightened. Go ahead, Daniel said. I read. Based on the agency's disclosure, the child's biological family has substantial assets. Establishing legal parenthood positions us favorably for any future claims. This should be viewed as a long-term investment. The words didn't blur. They didn't distort. They landed exactly as written. Cold. Clear. Intentional. Investment. That's what I was. Not a kid. Not a son. An investment. I set the paper down slowly. They planned it, I said. Yes, Daniel replied. They adopted me because of her. Yes. And when it didn't work, I stopped. I didn't need to finish the sentence. He did it for me. They cut their losses. The room felt smaller all of a sudden. Like the air had shifted. I stood up, walked a few steps toward the window, then stopped. Austin stretched out below, traffic moving, people going about their day, completely unaware that someone's entire understanding of their life had just been rewritten in a single office. I pressed my hand against the glass. Cool. Solid. Real. Unlike everything I'd just read. For years, I said, not turning around, I thought I did something wrong. I hadn't meant to say that out loud. But once it was out, it didn't feel like something I could take back. I thought maybe I was difficult. Maybe I pushed too hard. Maybe I wasn't enough. Silence behind me. Not uncomfortable. Just respectful. I kept trying to figure out what I could have done differently, I continued. What I could have fixed. I let out a quiet breath. There was nothing to fix, was there? No, Daniel said. I turned back toward him. Just money. He didn't answer that. He didn't need to. I went back to the desk and sat down again. There were still documents left in the folder. What else? I asked. Daniel reached forward and pulled out a separate envelope. This one was different. Sealed. Older. This, he said, placing it gently in front of me, is a letter from your grandmother. I stared at it. My name was written on the front. In careful handwriting. Ethan Cole. Not dear beneficiary. Not to whom it may concern. Just me. She left instructions that this be given to you directly, he said. And that it be read before any legal proceedings move forward. My fingers hovered over the envelope. For a second, I didn't move. Because opening it meant something. It meant stepping into a version of my life where I hadn't been alone all those years. Or worse. A version where someone had known, and still stayed away. Take your time, Daniel said. I nodded. Then, slowly, I broke the seal. The paper inside was folded neatly. I unfolded it carefully. And started reading. My dear Ethan. I stopped immediately. Closed my eyes for just a second. Then continued. If you're reading this, it means I've run out of time to say these things to you in person, and for that, I am deeply sorry. My grip tightened slightly on the page. I knew about you from the day you were born. Your mother, my daughter, Claire, sent me photos every week. She loved you more than anything in this world. My chest tightened. Claire. Not just your mother. A name. A real person. When she passed, I wanted to bring you here to Austin and raise you myself. But I was told by the agency that placing you with an older relative, out of state, would not be approved. I swallowed. When you were adopted, I believed you were going to a good home. I wrote letters. I sent gifts. Every single one was returned unopened. My hands stilled. Returned. Unopened. I was told you didn't want contact. That you were happy. That you had moved on. A quiet, bitter realization settled in. They didn't just take me. They erased her. Years later, I learned the truth. I leaned forward slightly. Your adoptive parents contacted me directly. They asked for financial support in exchange for continuing to raise you. When I refused, they made it clear they would not continue caring for you without compensation. The room went completely silent. Even the faint hum of the air conditioning seemed to disappear. 9 days later, they sent you away. I stopped reading. My hands were completely still now. Not shaking. Just still. Because everything had just connected. Every question. Every gap. Every why. Answered. Not with confusion. Not with misunderstanding. But with intent. I looked up at Daniel. They were paid, I said. They tried to be, he corrected. When that failed, they acted accordingly. Acted accordingly. That was one way to put it. I looked back down at the letter. There was more. And something told me. The worst of it wasn't even finished yet. I didn't finish the letter right away. I sat there in Daniel Whitaker's office in Austin, the paper still in my hands, staring at the last line I'd read like if I looked at it long enough, it might change. It didn't. 9 days later, they sent you away. 9 days. For 12 years, I thought that night at the airport had been impulsive. Emotional. A breaking point I somehow pushed them to. But it wasn't. It was scheduled. Planned. Calculated down to the day. I swallowed and forced myself to keep reading. I should have come to you sooner. I should have told you the truth the moment I realized what had happened. But I was afraid. Afraid. The word felt human. Imperfect. I watched from a distance. I made sure you were safe. I followed your school records, your college applications, your early jobs. I saw you struggle, and I saw you succeed. I told myself that if you could build a life without me, then perhaps my presence would only complicate things further. I let out a slow breath. She'd been there. Not physically. But there. That was my mistake. My grip tightened slightly on the paper. You deserved the truth. You deserved a choice. I closed my eyes for a second. A choice. Something I'd never really been given. Everything I have, I leave to you, not as compensation, because no amount of money can replace what you lost, but as a foundation. Something you can use however you choose. I glanced briefly at Daniel. He was watching me, not intruding, just present. I looked back down. More than anything, I want you to know this, you were never unwanted. You were loved, imperfectly, from too far away, for far too long, but you were loved. That line hit harder than anything else. Not the money. Not the betrayal. That. Because for 12 years, the story I told myself had been simple. They didn't want me. No one did. And now. That wasn't true. Not entirely. I finished the letter. If there is one thing I hope you take from all of this, it's this: you owe nothing to the people who treated you as a transaction. Family is not defined by paperwork or titles. It is defined by presence, by care, by truth. I folded the paper slowly. Carefully. Like it might fall apart if I didn't. She knew, I said quietly. Yes, Daniel replied. And she just watched? She monitored your situation, he said. There are records of private investigators ensuring you weren't in danger. She intervened quietly when necessary. Intervened how? Anonymous financial assistance at certain points, he said. Nothing that would trace back to her directly. I thought back. Moments that hadn't made sense at the time. A rent payment that had somehow gone through when I knew my account was empty. A scholarship I didn't remember applying for. A job opportunity that had come out of nowhere. I'd always chalked it up to luck. It wasn't luck. She was there, I said. In her own way, Daniel replied. I nodded slowly. I didn't know how to feel about that. Grateful. Confused. A little angry. All of it at once. Daniel slid another document across the desk. Before we move forward, he said, there's one more thing you need to see. I looked down. Legal paperwork. Filed. Stamped. Thomas Cole and Rachel Cole versus estate of Margaret Holloway. I already knew the basics. But seeing it in writing made it real. What exactly are they claiming? I asked. They're arguing that as your legal guardians for 17 years, they have a financial interest in any inheritance you receive, Daniel said. I scanned the page. Then stopped at the number. 45%? I said. Yes. I let out a quiet breath. They started at 50 on the call, I muttered. Guess they're negotiating with themselves. Daniel gave a faint, almost amused look. It's a pressure tactic, he said. They assume you'll want to avoid litigation. Public exposure. They're hoping you'll settle. Settle? I repeated. For a lower percentage, he said. Something that feels like a compromise. I leaned back in my chair. They abandoned me, I said. I'm aware. and they think I'm going to pay them to go away? They're betting you value peace more than principle. I thought about that. For a long second. Because if this had happened a year ago, 2 years ago, they might have been right. I didn't like conflict. I didn't like attention. I didn't like dragging things out. But now I had the full picture. They're wrong, I said. Daniel nodded once. I suspected you'd say that. A knock came at the door. Daniel's assistant stepped in slightly. Mr. Whitaker, there's a call for you, she said. From a Claire Jennings. She says it's urgent. Daniel frowned slightly. Put her through to my office line, he said. She nodded and stepped out. Who's Claire Jennings? I asked. Daniel looked thoughtful for a second. Name sounds familiar, he said. Give me a moment. A few seconds later, his desk phone rang. He answered. Whitaker. A pause. Then. Yes, I understand, you're certain? His expression shifted. Not dramatically. But enough. I see, he said. Yes, he's here with me now. Another pause. Then. All right. Thank you for reaching out. He hung up. Silence sat between us for a moment. What is it? I asked. Daniel leaned back slightly in his chair. That was Claire Jennings, he said. She's a retired social worker. My chest tightened. From my adoption? I asked. Yes. I sat up straighter. What did she say? He folded his hands together. She said she's been following the legal filings, he explained. Your parents' claim. And she believes she has additional documentation that wasn't included in the official records. I frowned. What kind of documentation? He paused. Then. She used a specific phrase, he said. She said she wanted to correct a mistake she made years ago. Something in my chest shifted. Not fear. Something else. Anticipation. What mistake? I asked. She didn't elaborate over the phone, he said. But she did say she has copies of internal communications, including emails, that were never formally submitted. Emails. My mind immediately went back to the one I'd already read. The investment. You think it's more of that? I asked. I think, Daniel said carefully, it could be significantly more. I sat back slowly. Everything was already bad. Already clear. But if there was more. Where is she now? I asked. She's in Houston, he said. But she's willing to travel here. To Austin? Yes. When? Daniel glanced at his phone. She said she could be here within 2 days. 2 days. I exhaled slowly. Everything was moving fast now. Faster than I expected. All right, I said. Set it up. He nodded. I will. A few hours later, I left Daniel's office. The sun was lower in the sky now, casting long shadows across the streets of Austin. I walked without really thinking about where I was going. Just moving. Letting everything settle. The letter. The documents. The truth. For years, my story had been incomplete. Pieces missing. Now those pieces were falling into place. And the picture they were forming wasn't just abandonment. It was strategy. Calculation. A plan that started long before I was old enough to understand it. And now. It was unraveling. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. Unknown number. Texas again. I stared at it for a second. Then answered. Hello? Ethan. My father. His voice was different this time. Less controlled. Tighter. We need to talk, he said. I leaned against a nearby building, watching people pass by on the sidewalk. No, I said. This isn't something you can just ignore, he continued. I'm not ignoring it, I replied. I'm handling it. Through my lawyer. A sharp exhale on his end. You're making a mistake, he said. Am I? Yes, he snapped. You don't understand how this works. You're in over your head. I almost smiled. Because for the first time, I wasn't. I understand more than you think, I said. A pause. Then. What does that mean? He asked. I pushed off the wall, straightening. It means, I said, you should have been more careful about what you put in writing. Silence. Not confusion. Not denial. Recognition. You don't know what you're talking about, he said quickly. I think I do, I replied. Another pause. Longer this time. Then his voice dropped slightly. You think one email is enough to build a case, he said. One email. So he knew exactly which one I meant. I think it's a start, I said. I could hear him breathing on the other end. Tense. Calculating. This doesn't have to get ugly, he said finally. It already is, I replied. Then I hung up. As I slid my phone back into my pocket, one thought settled in clearly. For 12 years, they'd had control of the narrative. Of what happened. Of why. Now. That control was slipping. And whatever Claire Jennings was bringing with her was about to take the rest of it away. Claire Jennings arrived in Austin 2 days later. I got the call from Daniel early that morning while I was in the hotel lobby, halfway through a cup of coffee that had already gone cold. She's here, he said. Can you be at the office in 30 minutes? I'll be there, I replied. I didn't even finish the coffee. By the time I reached Daniel's office in Austin, Claire was already there. She was smaller than I expected. Late 50s, maybe early 60s. Gray hair pulled back neatly, simple clothes, no-nonsense posture, but there was something else too. Guilt. You could see it in the way she held herself. Like she'd been carrying something heavy for a long time. She stood when I walked in. You must be Ethan, she said. Her voice was steady, but careful. Like she wasn't sure what she was allowed to say yet. Yeah, I said. You're Claire. She nodded. Thank you for coming, I added. I should have come a long time ago, she said quietly. That line hung in the air for a second. Then Daniel gestured toward the table. Let's sit, he said. We all took our seats. Claire placed a worn leather folder on the table in front of her. Not thick. But not empty either. I wasn't sure if I should reach out, she began. I've thought about it for years. But when I saw the filing, when I saw what they were trying to do. She shook her head slightly. I couldn't stay quiet anymore. I leaned forward slightly. What exactly do you have? I asked. She opened the folder. Carefully. Like what was inside mattered. Because it did. These are copies, she said. Originals are archived, but I verified everything before coming here. She slid the first document across the table. An internal memo. Agency letterhead. Dated a few months before my adoption was finalized. I scanned it quickly. Then slower. Then stopped. Applicant demonstrates unusual fixation on financial potential of child's biological lineage. Concern noted. Another one. Recommendation, further evaluation advised prior to approval. I looked up. They flagged them more than once, I said. Claire nodded. Yes. Then why did it go through? Her expression tightened slightly. Because my supervisor overruled it, she said. Said I was overanalyzing. That some adoptive parents just want to understand long-term stability. I let out a quiet breath. Stability, I repeated. That's what we told ourselves, she said. Not defensive. Just honest. And the email? I asked. The one about the investment? Claire nodded again. I remember that day clearly, she said. It came through by mistake, CC'd to the agency. I flagged it immediately. What happened? My supervisor told me to ignore it, she said. Said it was taken out of context. That we didn't have grounds to deny the adoption based on speculation. I leaned back slightly. So you let it go. It wasn't an accusation. But it wasn't neutral either. Her eyes met mine. I did, she said. And I've regretted it ever since. Silence settled for a moment. Not tense. Just real. Then she reached into the folder again. There's more, she said. She pulled out another document. This one wasn't an official form. It was an email thread. Printed. Multiple pages. She slid it toward me. This is the one I didn't report, she said. I frowned slightly. Why not? Her fingers tightened slightly against the edge of the table. Because it didn't come through official channels, she said. It was forwarded to me by accident from another caseworker's inbox. I wasn't supposed to have it. I looked down at the pages. Then back up at her. What is it? Her voice dropped slightly. It's communication between your father and his attorney, she said. A few weeks before you were sent to Seattle. My chest tightened instantly. I picked up the pages. Started reading. If Holloway refuses financial cooperation, alternative options will need to be considered. Maintaining guardianship without return is not sustainable. I felt my grip tighten. Kept reading. At that point, relocation may be the most practical solution. Minimizing liability while preserving long-term positioning. Relocation. That's what they called it. Not abandonment. Not throwing a 17-year-old out with nowhere to go. Relocation. I flipped to the next page. Ensure documentation supports voluntary transition. Avoid language that could imply negligence. I stopped. Looked up slowly. They planned the cover story, I said. Yes, Claire replied. They knew exactly what they were doing. Yes. The word landed heavier this time. Because there was no room left for doubt. No misunderstanding. No gray area. Just intent. I looked back down at the email. At the words. At the way everything had been framed like a business decision. Because that's what it was. Not emotional. Not reactive. Calculated. I was a liability, I said quietly. Claire didn't respond. She didn't need to. Daniel leaned forward slightly. This, he said, tapping the document, changes everything. I glanced at him. How? Because now we're not just talking about unethical behavior, he explained. We're talking about premeditated abandonment with documented intent. I nodded slowly. And the claim they filed? He gave a small, almost grim smile. It collapses, he said. Completely. For the first time since all of this started. I felt something shift. Not relief. Not yet. But something close. They're not going to back down, I said. No, Daniel agreed. They won't. Then what happens next? He leaned back slightly. We proceed to mediation, he said. Which was already scheduled. I frowned. When? 3 days from now, he replied. 3 days. Everything was moving fast again. Will they know about this? I asked, nodding toward the documents. Not yet, he said. But they will soon enough. I exhaled slowly. Good, I said. Claire reached into her folder one last time. There's one more thing, she said. She pulled out a smaller envelope. Different from the others. This one looked older. Worn. I found this in the archived file, she said. It was never logged properly. She slid it toward me. I looked at it. My name wasn't on it. No label. No markings. What is it? I asked. Her expression softened slightly. A letter, she said. From who? She hesitated. Then. From you, she said. I blinked. What? You wrote it, she explained. When you were 16. It was part of a required evaluation, something we ask older adoptees to complete before finalizing long-term placement decisions. I stared at the envelope. 16. That would have been. Right before. Why didn't I ever see this again? I asked. Her jaw tightened slightly. Because it was never added to your official file, she said. Why? She didn't answer immediately. Then. Because it contradicted the narrative your parents were presenting, she said. A slow, cold feeling settled in my chest. What did I write? I asked. Her eyes met mine. You should read it, she said. I picked up the envelope. Turned it over in my hands. For a second, I didn't open it. Because I already knew. Whatever was inside was going to confirm everything. I broke the seal. Unfolded the paper. And started reading. The handwriting was mine. Messier. Younger. But mine. I don't think they actually want me here. I stopped. My chest tightened instantly. They're nice when other people are around, but when it's just us, it's different. I swallowed. Kept going. I try to stay out of the way so I don't make things worse. My grip on the paper tightened. I don't think they like me very much. I exhaled slowly. If there's another place I can go, I think that would be better. I stopped reading. Lowered the paper slightly. For a second, everything felt very still. Because there it was. Proof. Not just of what they did. But of what I knew. Even back then. I looked up at Claire. You had this, I said. Yes. And you didn't use it? Her expression didn't change. I tried, she said. But I didn't push hard enough. Silence. Then. I'm pushing now. I nodded slowly. And for the first time. I believed her. Daniel stood. We'll need to prepare for mediation, he said. This changes our approach entirely. I folded the letter carefully. Slid it back into the envelope. And placed it on the table. Good, I said. Because for the first time in 12 years. I wasn't walking into something unprepared. They thought they controlled the story. They thought they could pressure me. Manipulate me. Push me into a quiet settlement. But now. I had the truth. And in 3 days. So would everyone else. The mediation was scheduled for 9 a.m. at a private legal office in downtown Austin. I arrived early. Not because I had to. But because I didn't want to walk into that room rushed, unprepared, or reacting. I wanted control. For once. Daniel was already there when I walked in, seated at a long conference table with his laptop open, documents neatly arranged in front of him. Claire Jennings sat a few seats away, reviewing a printed copy of the files she'd brought. She looked up when I entered. Gave me a small nod. Not nervous. Not hesitant. Steady. You ready? Daniel asked. I took my seat beside him. No, I said honestly. But I'm here. He gave a slight smile. That's enough. At 9:07 a.m., the door opened. Thomas Cole walked in first. Same posture. Same controlled expression. Same way of scanning the room, like he was already calculating how to manage it. Rachel followed behind him. Perfectly put together. Composed. Eyes already slightly glossy, like she'd rehearsed exactly how emotional she needed to look. And behind them, their attorney. Mid-40s, sharp suit, sharper eyes. The kind of person who didn't waste time on small talk. They took their seats across from us. No greetings. No acknowledgement. Just positioning. A few seconds later, the mediator entered. Neutral expression. Professional. Late 50s. She took her seat at the head of the table and glanced around the room. "All right," she said. "Let's begin." The first 20 minutes were exactly what I expected. Formal introductions. Statements of position. Their attorney spoke first. "My clients," he said, gesturing toward Thomas and Rachel, "provided 17 years of care, support, and financial stability to Mr. Cole. They are seeking a reasonable portion of the estate in recognition of that contribution." 17 years. He said it like the last night never happened. Like the airport didn't exist. Like I hadn't been left with nothing. Daniel didn't respond immediately. He let the statement sit. Then, "We reject that characterization entirely," he said calmly. "And we intend to demonstrate that the petitioner's actions were not those of parents, but of individuals acting with clear financial intent." Their attorney didn't react. Just leaned back slightly. "Strong claim," he said. "Let's see the evidence." Daniel slid the first document across the table. The adoption file. Highlighted sections visible immediately. Thomas didn't touch it at first. Rachel did. She glanced down. Then froze for just a fraction of a second before recovering. Not long enough for most people to notice. "But I did." "You were aware of Margaret Holloway's financial status prior to the adoption," Daniel said, voice even. "That's standard background information," their attorney replied quickly. "It doesn't imply intent." "Of course," Daniel said. "Which is why we also have this." He slid the second document forward. The email. The one I'd read in Daniel's office. Thomas picked it up this time. His eyes scanned it quickly. Then again. Then he set it down. Carefully. "That's taken out of context," he said. "The exact same line. Same tone. Same control." Daniel didn't respond right away. Instead, he reached for another document. The email thread Claire had brought. "This one should provide additional context," he said. He passed copies across the table. Their attorney leaned forward, reading quickly. Rachel glanced at Thomas. Thomas didn't look at her. He was focused on the page. And for the first time, his expression cracked. Just slightly. But enough. "This doesn't prove anything," their attorney said, though his tone had shifted. Less confident. "It proves intent," Daniel replied. "It proves discussion," the attorney countered. "That's not the same thing." Daniel nodded once. "Agreed," he said. "Which is why we also have testimony." He gestured toward Claire. "Ms. Jennings?" Claire straightened slightly. Calm. Clear. "I was the caseworker assigned to Ethan's adoption," she said. "I've flagged concerns multiple times regarding the Coles' focus on financial aspects of the child's biological background." Their attorney leaned forward. "Concerns that were reviewed and dismissed," he said. "Yes," Claire replied. "Dismissed, not disproven." A brief pause. Then she continued. "I also received internal communications that were not included in the official file, which indicate premeditated intent to leverage the adoption for potential financial gain." Silence. Not heavy. Not dramatic. Just undeniable. Rachel let out a soft breath. Then she started crying. Right on cue. I can't believe this, she said, voice trembling. After everything we did for you. I didn't look at her. Not yet. Ethan, she continued, turning slightly toward me, we loved you. We took you in when no one else would. No one else? I said, finally speaking. My voice wasn't loud. But it cut through everything. She tried to contact you, I added. My grandmother. She sent letters. Gifts. You returned all of them. Rachel's expression faltered. Just for a second. Then. We were protecting you, she said quickly. We didn't think it was healthy to introduce. You asked her for money, I said. That stopped her. Completely. The room went still. Thomas shifted slightly in his chair. Ethan, he started. When she refused, I continued, you sent me away. That's not what happened, he said. It is, I replied. Their attorney stepped in quickly. Let's keep this focused on verifiable facts, he said. Absolutely, Daniel said. Then he reached into his folder and pulled out the final document. The letter. The one I wrote when I was 16. This was part of the evaluation process prior to the finalization of long-term placement, he said, sliding it across the table. It was excluded from the official file. Their attorney picked it up. Read the first few lines. Then slowed down. Then stopped. Rachel looked at him. What is it? She asked. He didn't answer right away. Just handed it to Thomas. Thomas read it. And for the first time since he walked into that room, he didn't have a response. No explanation. No reframing. Nothing. Because there it was. In my own words. From before everything happened. Proof that I knew. Proof that I felt it. Proof that this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a pattern. The mediator finally spoke. Her voice calm, but firmer now. Based on the evidence presented, she said, it appears there are serious questions regarding the intent behind the adoption and subsequent actions taken by the petitioners. No one interrupted her. Given these circumstances, she continued, I strongly advise reconsidering your claim. Their attorney leaned back slowly. Thinking. Calculating. Then he turned slightly toward Thomas and Rachel, lowering his voice. A quiet conversation. I couldn't hear the words. But I didn't need to. I could see it. The shift. The realization. The understanding that this wasn't going the way they expected. A few minutes later, their attorney looked back up. My clients are willing to discuss a revised settlement, he said. Daniel didn't even hesitate. No, he replied. The word landed clean. Final. The attorney's expression tightened slightly. You haven't heard the terms, he said. We don't need to, Daniel replied. Silence. Then. Thomas leaned forward. Ethan, he said, voice lower now, less controlled than before, you're making a mistake. I looked at him. Really looked. At the man who had stood at the airport and handed me that ticket like it was nothing. At least let us explain. You've had 12 years, I said. And that was it. The mediator closed her folder. I think we're done here, she said. No formal ruling yet. That would come later. But the direction was clear. Unmistakable. This wasn't a negotiation anymore. It was a collapse. As everyone started gathering their things, Rachel tried one last time. She stood quickly, reaching toward me. Ethan, please. I stepped back. Not aggressively. Just enough. Don't, I said. She froze. Her hand hanging in the air. You don't get to do that, I added. Not now. Her eyes filled again. But this time. It didn't land. Not even a little. I turned and walked out of that room. Daniel beside me. Claire just behind us. No rush. No hesitation. Just, done. Out in the hallway, the air felt different. Lighter. Not because everything was resolved, but because something had shifted. For the first time. They weren't in control anymore. And whatever happened next wouldn't be on their terms. The official ruling came 4 days later. I was back in Seattle by then, sitting at my desk like nothing had changed, same office, same plans spread out in front of me, same gray sky outside the window. Except everything had changed. My phone buzzed just after 11 a.m. Daniel. I answered immediately. It's done, he said. No build-up. No hesitation. Tell me, I replied. A brief pause. Then. The claim has been denied in full, he said. Your parents receive nothing. I leaned back slowly in my chair. Not surprised. Not relieved. Just steady. There's more, he added. I closed my eyes for a second. Of course there is. The judge has referred the case for further investigation, he continued. Specifically regarding potential adoption fraud and abandonment. That landed differently. Heavier. Criminal? I asked. It's possible, he said carefully. At the very least, there will be a formal review of their actions. I exhaled slowly. For years, I'd imagined what it would feel like if the truth ever came out. If someone finally said it out loud. What they did. What it was. Now. That was happening. All right, I said. You're officially recognized as the sole heir to Margaret Holloway's estate, he continued. Everything transfers to you. Everything. The word felt bigger than the number ever did. Thanks, Daniel, I said. You earned it, he replied. And then the call ended. I sat there for a while after that. Just looking out the window. Watching the city move like it always did. Cars. People. Normal life. Because that's the strange part about moments like this. The world doesn't stop. Even when yours shifts completely. 3 days later, the story broke. It started small. A local legal reporter who had access to court filings picked it up first. Then another outlet. Then another. Within a week, it was everywhere. Headlines spread fast. Texas couple accused of adopting child for financial gain. Court rejects parents' claim to son's inheritance after abandonment allegations. Adoption under investigation following fraud evidence. I didn't go looking for it. But it found me anyway. Texts from coworkers. Messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Links. Screenshots. Reactions. Is this about you? Are you okay? I had no idea. I didn't respond to most of them. Not because I couldn't. But because I didn't feel the need to explain myself anymore. The truth was already out there. For the first time. I didn't have to carry it alone. A week after that, I got an email from Claire Jennings. Subject, update. I opened it. Ethan. The Illinois Child Welfare Office has officially opened a review into your adoption case. I've submitted all documentation we discussed. I know this doesn't undo what happened, but it may prevent something like this from happening to someone else. I'm sorry it took me this long to act. Claire. I read it twice. Then closed the laptop. She was right. It didn't undo anything. But it mattered. In a different way. I never heard from Thomas or Rachel again. Not directly. No calls. No messages. Nothing. But I heard about them. Everyone did. Their names were everywhere for a while. Online forums. Comment sections. People picking apart their lives piece by piece. Old neighbors speaking up. Former colleagues distancing themselves. I heard Thomas lost his position. That Rachel deleted every social account she had. That they moved out of state quietly. No announcements. No explanations. Just gone. Part of me expected to feel something when I heard all that. Satisfaction. Closure. Something. But I didn't. Not really. Because none of that changed what had already happened. It didn't give me back the years. It didn't rewrite the night at the airport. It didn't turn them into different people. It just confirmed everything. A month later, I flew back to Texas. Not for them. For her. For Margaret Holloway. I visited the house for the first time. It sat just outside the city, quiet, surrounded by trees, the kind of place that felt removed from everything else. Peaceful. I walked through it slowly. Room by room. Not looking for anything specific. Just taking it in. This was where she lived. Where she wrote that letter. Where she kept track of a life she wasn't part of. There were photos. Old ones. My mother, Claire, smiling, young, holding a baby that had to be me. I stood there for a long time. Just looking at it. Trying to connect something that had never really existed for me before. I didn't move to Texas. Not permanently. My life was still in Seattle. My job. My routine. Everything I built. But I kept the house. Visited when I needed space. When I needed quiet. When I needed to remember that my story didn't start and end with what happened to me. I used part of the inheritance to set up something else. A small foundation. Nothing flashy. Just enough to help kids aging out of foster care. Housing assistance. Education support. Things I wish I had. I named it after my mother. Claire Holloway. It felt right. 6 months later, I wrote something. Not for court. Not for lawyers. Just for me. And eventually, I shared it. Not expecting much. Just needing to say it once, clearly. On my terms. Here's what I wrote. I was adopted at 5. Left at 17. Spent 12 years building a life without the people who were supposed to protect me. Then I found out the reason why. It wasn't about me. It was never about me. Some people don't see relationships. They see opportunity. And when that opportunity disappears, so do they. But here's what I've learned. You don't owe loyalty to people who treated you like a transaction. You don't owe forgiveness just because someone has a title. And walking away isn't weakness. It's clarity. I'm not angry anymore. Not because they deserve forgiveness. But because they don't deserve space in my life. I built something without them. And that's enough. I didn't expect it to spread. But it did. Thousands of shares. Messages from people who'd been through something similar. Different stories. Same patterns. Same pain. And the same question. What do I do now? If you've made it this far, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had to choose yourself over people who were supposed to choose you first? Not in a small way. In a real, life-changing way. If you have, you already know. That choice isn't easy. But it matters. And if this story meant something to you, take a second to like and subscribe to Women Reddit Stories. Only if you actually want more stories like this. And if you're comfortable, drop your experience in the comments. You never know who might read it and feel a little less alone. A year after everything, I went back to the house one last time. Not to stay. Just to visit. I sat out on the back porch as the sun went down, the air warm, quiet, steady. No noise. No pressure. No past chasing me down. Just stillness. For a long time, I thought closure would feel like something dramatic. A big moment. A final conversation. An apology. It didn't. It felt like this. Quiet. Simple. Complete. And for the first time since I was 17. I wasn't waiting for anything anymore.